So think about it this way. So this is a true story. Somebody I interviewed for the book, based in, stone's throw from where we are right now. And he was in a company, he was focused on the things that he loved to do, he's doing a great job at them, but then his company was purchased by a larger, more bureaucratic firm. And he went in there wanting to be, good citizen, team player, which was code for, try to say yes to everyone without really thinking about it. So if there's an email chain, he wants to be the first person on it. If there's a conference call and he's invited, he goes. A meeting, the same. But what he found was that as the frustration and stress was going up, his quality of work was going down. And eventually that gap became so large and painful, he considered leaving the company altogether. And just to make the temptation even greater, they actually came to him and offered him an early retirement package. Well, what to do? He goes to a mentor, and as they discuss this, they realize that he doesn't want to retire at all. What he wants to do is do this kind of work. Even if he retired, he'd just start a consultancy doing the same kind of work he's already doing. And then he thought, well, who would my clients be? Well, one of them would be the company I'm currently working for, because they could clearly use the help. So the mentor, listening to all of this, says, you know what? You need to retire, enroll. Now, that's different than quit, stay, and don't tell anybody. Right? That's not, we sometimes worked with people in that category. It was to use a lens of focusing on a few things. For example, he just said, well, if I was a consultant into this company, I wouldn't be on every email chain. And I wouldn't go to every meeting. I would use so much more selectivity about what I did. And so he started pushing back. Started not simply going to everything, not attending every meeting. In fact, one of the meetings he'd been regularly going to, he just, stopped going to. It was an experiment. That doesn't always work well, but what happened for him is that they came to him a little concerned, well, we missed you at the meeting. He said, oh, what do you need? Oh, well, we needed this project getting done. Oh, great, I'll do that by the end of the week. Solved his hour commitment in the meeting, 2 minutes conversation, done. Well, he continued this experiment for a few months. What happened? He got fired. I didn't get fired, but it would change the tenor of the conversation if that is what had happened. Now, this is what happened. Let's start at home, first of all. At home, what he got back was, he said he got his life back. At 6 o'clock, he put off the phone. It wasn't necessary anymore. He set a different expectation, so he ate dinner with his wife every night. He went to the gym. Suddenly, he got a sense of control back. What happened at work? By the end of the year, his performance ratings went up, massively up. And he ended off the year with one of the largest bonuses of his whole career. How is it possible? Well, actually, the way it's possible is arithmetic. It's a really simple idea and possible to execute. Because you can either do many, many things averagely well, or you can do a few things superbly well. And if you do the right few things superbly well, you are far more likely to be acknowledged for what you've done and to make a significant contribution. And so this is the value proposition of essentialism. Is done right, you can increase your contribution overall. Well, what about you? All right, so I want you to snap if these are true for you, okay? I want you to think about this. So have you ever been overworked and at the same time underutilized? Okay, snap for that. Okay, have you ever been stretched too thin at work or at home? Snap for that. All right. Have you ever said yes just to please? Okay. Or just to appease? Or just to avoid trouble? Right? So if you snap for any of the above, then the way out is what I would call the way of the essentialist. It's a very different way of thinking about everything else. It's not one more thing to cram into your overstuffed life. It's not just one more little idea, okay, that's good, I should be an essentialist sometimes too. It's a different way of looking at everything, a different lens, a different mindset. And it's radically, totally different than what we see today in society. Because I would argue to you, with you, that we are going through right now a new bubble. So we've had, of course, Silicon Valley bubbles before, and we've had real estate bubbles, and years before that, centuries before, we had the tulip bubble and all of this, right? We know about bubbles. But I think right now we have a bubble of more, where we are irrationally overvaluing the idea of having it all, doing it all, fitting it all in if we possibly can. That this, in fact, is the very way to success. But what I found is the opposite. That logic leads to the undisciplined pursuit of more, to use Jim Collins' phrase. And the antidote to it is the disciplined pursuit of less but better. So you can take that design ethic. The design ethic, by the way, came from Dieter Rams, the head designer at Braun for 35 years. And he summarized all of his life's learnings into 10 principles, summarized those even further to 1, and then summarized that into 3 words, less but better. And he applied it to the design of products, and superbly successful in doing so. But I want to make the case that we can take that same design ethic and use it to great advantage in our careers, in our leadership, and also in our lives writ large. And the importance of that is difficult to overstate, because it is a matter of fact, and I want to put it to you and then ask a kind of a big and crucial question for our conversation today. I'll put it to you that the evidence is that at the end of our lives, there seems to be a tendency to regret the way we lived them. Bronnie Ware is the Australian nurse. This is just one example, one data point, but she spoke to a lot of people at the end of their lives, captured them, and wrote a piece called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. At the top of that list was having lived a life that was not true to myself, but to the life other people expected of me. And the second was too much time in work, too little time with family and key relationships. And then the list goes on. But the point I want to put to you is that nobody intended to be there. Nobody designed that outcome. It happened by default. And my question to you is how it happened. So here's the question. Why is it that otherwise intelligent people end up getting tricked by the trivial? This is my question to you. It's not an insignificant question, because other people just as smart as you, as us, just as driven, just as thoughtful, just as careful, somehow seem to end up where they didn't intend to end up. And that is more than intellectual curiosity, although it is that to me. It's also just a question we ought to ask about, because, you know, we just get the one wild and precious life after all. So how do we design our choices really matters. So coming back to you now, I want the answers again, fast and furious. Why is it that otherwise intelligent people get tricked by the trivial? This is the question I want to put to you. What are your thoughts? So you're just so busy, you get into like a busyness cycle, where you're so busy you don't have any time to think. And so that means that you're so busy that you don't have any time to think. And so it goes for many, many years. And so this is why, I mean, very routinely I'm talking to people, you know, here in the Valley and all over, that will say, yeah, I ended up spending 15 years at X company, and I just can't understand how I did that, why that happened, or why I spent the time doing that when there were other things I really wanted to do. So I love that idea, a busyness cycle. Thank you for that answer. More, go.
It gives a false sense of accomplishment. When you do trivial things, you can accomplish them, the bigger ones are more attractive.
Yeah, small, quick wins, or at least feel like wins. They get them off the plate. I sent the email, I responded to that person. It feels like accomplishment. And by the way, if you didn't say it, but it was true for you, I want you to snap for those too. Thank you for that. More. There was another hand. Go. And others, don't be shy. I want your thoughts. Go.
Yeah, we respond to urgency before more than importance.
That's a great new phrase for us all there. A to-do list pack rat. What does it mean really, though?
Well, the list gets longer and longer and longer, and it costs the rate when you cross things off to do things.
Yeah, have you ever noticed that by the end of the day, your list is longer than at the beginning? Yeah, I once made a list like this, a list of everything that was on my mind, 400 things by the time I was done. Some of you would be much higher, smaller brain, that's how it goes. 400 things, and I just looked at that list and okay, and I thought, okay, from now on I'm going to cross off every time I do something, and I'm going to add it every time I make a commitment to anyone new, right? I just did it for a week or two just to see. Yeah, it's very predictable. The list got longer every single day. yeah, there's a problem there, isn't there? Like this is take that forward for the next however many years, and you've got a problem of perpetually being in a certain cycle, a certain challenge. Thank you for that. More. Go.
Passive participation in expectation.
Right. Passively going along with other people's agenda. Let me just speak to that for a moment. In fact, I was talking to Vint Cerf here. And we were talking about a few different things, but one of the things he said in passing, which I thought was interesting, is I must have mentioned information overload. And he said, oh, information overload. He says, I hear this all the time, but we've had information overload since we had a library. So, this is not some new challenge. Now, I don't fully agree with him because a library is still so passive in comparison to the information that has come as, over the last 20 years. But still, I think he's onto something, that it's not just information overload today that we're struggling with, it's opinion overload. And that's a very different psychological challenge. Information overload is just stuff you could learn about, stuff you could read about. Opinion overload that has come with the advancement of social media and smart technology means that people's agendas, which always affected us, suddenly are affecting us in a hyper-connected way. And so I think that's a nice point. More. What is it that tricks otherwise intelligent people to believe that what they're doing is important when it's not? How do we get tricked by the trivial? Don't be shy. Speak up. What are your thoughts?
Habit.
Habit? What do you mean by habit?
Feels normal.
It feels normal to just keep doing what we're doing. It's become routine. I love this. You two, I want to come back to in a moment. Let me just talk to this routine idea for a moment, because one of the things that interested me so much when I was looking into this whole subject is how do you make doing the essentials as effortless as possible? If doing the essential work in our life is always difficult, if it's always the hardest thing, we won't do it because we'll tend, in a sort of self-interested way to do the stuff that's effortless. So the key, of course, is eventually to get to the point where our routine supports the things that we think are actually essential, and making that as effortless as possible. And so in that mindset, I was visiting China, and I was in the Cube. You remember from the Beijing Olympics where Michael Phelps, astounded the world. And as I was sitting there watching it, I was struck by how different the kind of execution we all saw in that room is so different than the kind of execution we see on a day-to-day basis. I mean, for example, no one was forcing it at the last moment there, right? Nobody was, falling into the pool because they hadn't quite got themselves organized. I mean, the whole thing appeared effortless. I don't mean it really was, but there's still something about it being a kind of frictionless experience. And then as I went to research the Michael Phelps phenomenon there, I found that he had followed a very particular selected routine from his coach, Bob Bowman, and had followed that routine for many years prior to being in the Olympics. And this is the routine. He arrived 2 hours ahead of time. He swam a whole set of lengths, 400 backstroke, 800 freestyle, and so on. He gets out, puts on a particular kind of swimming trunks. Then he sits at 45 minutes before the time. He sits on the massage table, never lies down. From a certain point on, he never speaks to the coach, and the coach never speaks to him. It's just silent. When he sits down, about to go up to the podium, he always sits down and puts the towel to one side, his goggles to the other, puts in the same music. When they announce his name, they take out the same earbud first, then the other. He dries the podium, always gets on from the left side, and on it goes. This incredibly designed routine that he had practiced hundreds and hundreds of times prior to being in the Olympics. And it doesn't even end there. His coach had created what he called put in the videotape. There's no videotape, but the idea was every night and every morning he was to visualize in slow motion the perfect race. Every single stroke from beginning to end, including the elation of success, the screaming in triumph, and the water slow motion dripping off his face. Every day, twice a day, for a decade. When he came to the Olympics, it was so routine, so built into him. He just continued. He didn't have to think differently about it. It was routine. So in a way, what I want to do is turn this around and say, how do you build a habit or a routine that supports the things that are most essential, so that that becomes the default position, and not only when we're sort of aggressively trying to pursue it. Yeah, just what is essential and what isn't essential? I mean, this is a really important question, and it's a non-trivial question. And the thing that I want to put to you about this is that we just often now don't create the space to be able to think about this. In fact, I was at Twitter recently, and somebody said in passing, they just asked, they said, do you remember what it was like to be bored? They said, you know, when you're in the airport and the flight isn't coming and you don't have anything to do, you have to sort of think. Maybe you get a book and you read it, but you have to do something a little deeper. And he said, now there's none of that, none at all. We have used every ounce of that space. We're on the phone, we're responding, we're listening, we're taking information, and we're doing something. And it does raise the question of what a society will be like that doesn't ever ponder, that just is always plugged in, that is addicted in that sense.